The mountains were silent when a retired canine stopped cold, staring at a house that wasn't supposed to exist. His handler, an aging veteran who thought his war was long over, felt the past breathe again through broken walls and forgotten names. What they found inside wasn't treasure or danger, but a truth that had been waiting decades to be seen. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Blue Ridge Mountains, North Carolina, wore winter like an old uniform, creased, unforgiving, and never quite taken off. In the small town of Laurel Gap, the air smelled of wet pine, chimney smoke, and the iron bite of coming snow. January wind slid down the ridgelines and slipped through every loose board and cracked window frame it could find. Clouds sat low, dragging their bellies across the mountain shoulders, and the rain that fell wasn't dramatic. It was patient, persistent, the kind that found its way through cuffs, collars, and memory. The locals called it thin rain, but it carried weight, especially on an old man's joints and an old soldier's thoughts. Samuel Whitaker lived at the edge of town in a modest cabin that looked as if it had been built to apologize for taking up space. The porch steps bowed slightly under his weight, and the roof tin clicked when the wind shifted. Sam was 68, tall in a way that suggested he had once been broader before time and discipline carved him down. His face held sharp angles softened by age, a squared jaw, a nose that had been broken long ago and healed slightly crooked, and cheekbones that caught the light even when he wasn't trying. His hair, once dark, had faded to a steel gray, cut short because anything longer felt like an inconvenience. A trimmed beard roughened his chin and upper lip, more habit than style. His eyes were the kind that looked calm until you noticed they rarely stopped moving, always assessing distance, sound, exits. He didn't speak much, not because he couldn't, but because silence had become the only language that didn't ask him to explain himself. There had been events that shaped that quiet into something hardened. He'd come home from war with medals in a box and a noise in his head that never truly shut off. Loud sounds made his shoulders rise before his mind could catch up. Crowds pressed on him like heavy cloth. Nights were the worst, sleep was unreliable, and dreams often arrived with the same authority as orders. Over the years, Sam learned the small tricks of surviving himself. Coffee bitter enough to bite, long walks until his legs ached, and the kind of routine that kept the day from unraveling. That routine included Rex. Rex was a retired canine, German shepherd with a touch of Belgian Malinois in the lean set of his body and the bright, quick intelligence in his eyes. He was 10 years old, his muzzle dusted with gray like ash on black velvet. His ears still stood tall, as if refusing to admit time had a vote. A jagged scar ran beneath his left ear, hidden under fur unless the light hit it right. When he moved, he did it with purpose, even in simple things, crossing a room, sniffing a doorframe, circling a spot on the rug before lying down. Rex had weight to him, not just in muscle, but in presence. He carried himself like a dog who had learned that hesitation could cost lives. Yet there was gentleness too, especially around Sam, an attention so steady it felt like a vow. Sam didn't call Rex a pet. He didn't call him family either, not out loud. He simply called him by his name, and the way he said it made the word mean both. Rex had been paired with Sam late in his service after Sam's previous dog was injured and reassigned. It took months for Sam to trust again, and Rex met that distrust the way he met most things, quietly, consistently, without complaint. Rex learned Sam's rhythms. Sam learned Rex's signals. Between them grew an understanding older than friendship and more practical than affection, until affection came anyway, slipping in like the rain through a seam. That morning, Sam rose before daylight, as he always did. He stood at the small kitchen sink and watched the blackness beyond the window. The glass was cold, fogged at the edges. He poured coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Dad," something a niece had given him years ago, unaware of the irony or perhaps aiming at it. Sam never corrected anyone about his lack of children. He didn't want the conversation. He didn't want the sympathy. He didn't want to explain the emptiness that had followed him home and never learned how to leave. Rex waited by the door. He didn't whine or pace, he simply sat, a statue carved from discipline, watching Sam with the calm insistence of a partner who knew the mission came next. Sam pulled on a weathered field jacket, olive drab, patched at the elbows, and laced boots that had been resoled more than once. He checked his pockets out of habit, keys, folding knife, flashlight, an old compass he didn't really need. Then he reached for Rex's leash. The leash was thick nylon, faded from black to charcoal, with a metal clasp that clicked like a small, familiar bell. Rex allowed the collar to be clipped with a stillness that looked like obedience and felt like trust. The collar itself was plain now, no working dog harness, no tactical straps. Retirement for Rex meant fewer rules but not fewer responsibilities. He still worked, if only to keep Sam steady. Outside, the rain was fine and cold. It dampened the porch boards and turned the dirt into slick clay. The town was mostly asleep, only a few windows lit, a distant truck rumbling on the main road, and the faint sound of a radio somewhere playing an old country song too low to understand. Sam and Rex moved past mailboxes leaning like tired shoulders, past yards with winter grass pressed flat, past the last street lamp that buzzed as if it resented being awake. Near the town's edge, a figure stood under the awning of the only open place that early, a small corner store attached to a gas station. The woman was Sarah Calloway, the clerk who worked mornings and kept her kindness tucked into her tone the way some people tuck cigarettes into their shirt pockets. Sarah was in her late 40s, medium height with a sturdy build from years of lifting boxes and standing long shifts. Her skin was pale with a warm undertone, freckled across the nose, and her hair, reddish-brown, was pulled into a messy bun that always seemed to be one pin away from collapse. She wore a thick flannel shirt under a puffy vest, and her hands were red from the cold. Sarah wasn't nosy, but she noticed things. She had lived long enough to recognize loneliness when it walked past her door every morning on 2 legs and 4. "Mornin', Sam," she called softly, not loud enough to startle him. She nodded at Rex. "And mornin' to you too, handsome." Rex's tail moved once, slow, measured, like a salute rather than a wag. Sam lifted 2 fingers in something that almost qualified as a greeting. If he spoke, it came out quiet and plain. "Mornin'." Sarah didn't press him, she never did. Instead, she held out a paper bag. "Coffee's on the house, and I put a couple of those peanut butter crackers in there, for your partner." Sam's first instinct was refusal, old pride, old habits. But Sarah's expression carried no pity, only practicality. The world, she seemed to say, was cold enough without everyone pretending they didn't need each other. He accepted the bag with a short nod. "Thank you." "Be careful up there," Sarah added, eyes flicking toward the mountains where the fog thickened. "Weather's mean today." Sam looked toward the tree line. The ridge was half hidden, like a face behind a veil. "It always is." He and Rex continued on, leaving the last sign of town behind. The trailhead began as a narrow path between hemlocks, the ground dark with needles and rain. Rex stepped ahead, not pulling, just leading with quiet confidence. Sam followed, boots sinking slightly into the softened earth. The forest swallowed sound. No engines, no voices, only water dripping from branches and the occasional creak of a tree shifting its weight. As they crossed into the woods, Sam felt the familiar easing in his chest, the way the open air and steady footsteps pushed the tightness back, the way the world stopped demanding explanations. Rex moved beside him, shoulder near Sam's knee, close enough to anchor him without crowding him. Together, they walked deeper into the gray-green hush, 2 veterans of different species, both carrying histories too heavy to display, both knowing that forward was the only direction that ever truly worked. And somewhere ahead, though neither of them could have named it yet, the mountain held its secrets, waiting with the patience of stone. The forest closed around them with a quiet confidence, as if it had been waiting all morning for their arrival. The path narrowed, trading the trampled earth of human habit for something older, roots slick with rain, stones half swallowed by moss, fallen needles layered thick as felt. The rain thinned but never stopped. It clung to Sam's jacket and gathered on Rex's fur in small, patient beads. Each step carried them farther from Laurel Gap and deeper into a world that did not care who Sam Whitaker had been, only how he moved now. Sam walked with a steady pace, not hurried, not hesitant. Years ago, his stride had been sharper, driven by command and consequence. Now it was measured, economical, shaped by the understanding that the mountains were not an enemy to defeat, but a presence to be respected. His breath rose and fell evenly, fogging the air in front of him. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his whole body, to the forest's low conversation, the drip of water from branches, the distant knock of a woodpecker, the faint hiss of wind sliding through pine needles. Rex ranged slightly ahead, leash slack, posture alert without tension. His nose worked constantly, mapping the invisible. Every so often he paused, lifted his head, and tested the air. Sam watched these movements with the ease of long familiarity. He knew Rex's tells, the difference between curiosity and concern, between a passing scent and something that lingered. They reached a bend where the official trail marker leaned crookedly, its paint peeled down to bare wood. Beyond it, the path dipped toward a shallow ravine where a creek ran fast with rainwater, brown and swollen, speaking loudly to itself. Sam slowed, assessing the crossing. He'd crossed here many times before, boots finding the same stones, body remembering where to lean. Rex waited, glancing back, eyes bright and attentive. Halfway across the creek, Rex stopped. It wasn't abrupt. There was no bark, no stiffening of hackles. He simply froze, one paw lifted, head turned sharply to the left, his ears angled forward, catching something Sam could not hear. The leash tightened just enough for Sam to feel the change. "What is it?" Sam murmured, voice low, not because he feared the sound, but because softness had become his default. Rex did not look at him. His attention was fixed upslope, toward a section of forest thick with rhododendron and shadow. His body leaned subtly in that direction, muscles engaged but controlled, as if waiting for permission that might never come. Sam followed Rex's line of sight. To him, it looked like more of the same. Trees, brush, wet earth, no path, no marker, nothing that invited a man to step off what he knew. They stood like that for several seconds, rain tapping against leaves, the creek rushing at their calves. Sam felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the old instinct rising unbidden. Deviation meant danger. Unknown terrain demanded caution. That instinct had kept him alive. It had also kept him restless. Rex took one step toward the bank, testing, then another. He looked back at Sam, finally, eyes steady, expectant. Sam exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, not quite to the dog and not quite to himself. They climbed out of the creek and into the brush. The ground rose sharply, slick with mud. Sam leaned forward, boots searching for purchase, one hand gripping the leash, the other steadying himself against a tree trunk rough with lichen. Rex moved with surprising ease for his age, choosing his footing carefully, body angled to keep balance. He did not pull. He guided. As they pushed through the undergrowth, the forest changed character. The trees grew closer together, their trunks straighter, older. The air smelled different, less fresh pine, more damp wood and iron. Sam noticed it then, a faint metallic note that tugged at something deep in his memory. It was the smell of old tools, of forgotten places. He stopped again, heart giving a single heavy beat. That smell had followed him through too many nights overseas, clinging to temporary shelters and abandoned structures. It was the smell of human presence long after the humans had gone. "You picking that up?" Sam asked quietly. Rex's tail gave a small, controlled sweep. His nose dipped, then lifted again, confirming. They moved on. After several minutes, the ground leveled out. The brush thinned, opening into a small clearing where the trees stood back as if in reluctant respect. At the far edge of the clearing, something broke the pattern of green and gray. It was a shape too straight to be natural. Sam halted, every muscle alert now, the years falling away from his posture. His hand tightened on the leash, not to restrain Rex, but to feel him there. The object ahead resolved itself slowly through the mist, a structure partially collapsed, its roofline sagging under the weight of time and rain. A house, not a cabin built by hunters or a modern weekend retreat. This was older, its bones wrong for the forest that surrounded it. Weathered wooden siding hung loose in places, boards warped and darkened. One window gaped open, glass long gone. Another was shuttered with planks nailed on at uneven angles. The roof sloped sharply, patched with mismatched sheets of rusted metal. Ivy crept along one wall, claiming it inch by inch. Rex stopped at the edge of the clearing, stance firm. He did not advance. He did not retreat. His ears flicked back and forth, cataloging sound or the absence of it. Sam's pulse slowed, not from calm, but from focus. He studied the house the way he once studied unfamiliar compounds, angles, sight lines, places where something or someone could be hidden. The forest around it was unnaturally quiet, as if even the birds had agreed to keep their distance. "This isn't on any map," Sam muttered. He took a few cautious steps forward. The ground near the house was littered with old debris, splintered boards, a broken chair leg, a length of rope half buried in leaves. These were not recent signs. Whatever this place had been, it had been abandoned for a long time. Rex moved again, this time circling wide, nose low, tail stiff. His behavior shifted from simple alertness to something more deliberate. He paused near the side of the house, sniffed deeply, then let out a single soft huff. An exhale Sam recognized. Interest, not threat. Sam approached the porch. The boards groaned under his weight, a sound that echoed too loudly in the quiet clearing. He froze, listening. Nothing followed. No movement inside, no answering sound. The door hung slightly ajar, held by one hinge. Its surface was scarred with deep scratches, some too straight to be animal-made. Sam ran a gloved hand over the wood, feeling the grooves. Old marks, purposeful. A memory stirred, of makeshift safe houses, of temporary refuges built in haste and abandoned under pressure. He pushed the thought away, unwilling to let it take shape too soon. Rex came to stand beside him, shoulder brushing Sam's leg. The dog looked up briefly, checking in, then returned his gaze to the door. "We're just looking," Sam said, more for himself than for Rex. "That's all." He nudged the door with his boot. It swung inward with a low, complaining creak, revealing a dark interior that smelled of damp air and old dust. Sam did not step inside, not yet. He stood at the threshold, rain dripping from his jacket, and felt the weight of the moment settle over him. Whatever this place was, it was not empty in the way abandoned things usually were. It held something, history, maybe, or intention. Sam didn't know which, only that the mountains had not led them here by accident. Rex lowered his head and crossed the threshold first. Sam followed. The air inside the house was colder than the rain outside, as if the walls had been storing winter for years and were reluctant to let it go. Sam stepped in behind Rex and let the door fall closed on its own. It did not latch. It simply rested there, crooked and undecided, like the place itself. The smell struck him immediately, damp wood layered with dust, old oil, and something faintly metallic beneath it all. Not rot, not mold, something preserved by neglect rather than destroyed by it. Light filtered in through gaps in the siding and the broken window, thin blades cutting the gloom into uneven shapes. Sam stood still, letting his eyes adjust. He did not rush this part. Rushing was how people missed things. His boots left dark prints on the warped floorboards, which dipped slightly toward the center of the room. He noted the sag automatically, gauging weight and age. The structure was tired, but it wasn't giving up yet. Rex moved ahead, nose low, tail steady. He did not fan out wildly the way curious dogs did. He worked the room in a methodical pattern, circling the perimeter, pausing at corners, sniffing door frames. His claws clicked softly against the wood, a measured sound that grounded Sam more than any silence could have. The dog's body language was focused but calm. No raised hackles, no tension in the shoulders. Whatever had been here, it was not a threat now. The main room was larger than Sam expected. A long table sat against one wall, its surface scarred with knife marks and burns. 3 chairs remained, mismatched and uneven, their legs reinforced with crude repairs. A 4th chair lay broken in the corner, its back snapped clean through. Above the table hung a pegboard with rusted hooks, some empty, some still holding the ghosts of tools long removed. Sam's gaze lingered on the hooks. They were spaced with intention, not randomly placed. Someone had cared about order here. A small iron stove stood near the far wall, its pipe disappearing into the ceiling. Sam crouched and opened the stove door. Cold ash spilled out, gray and fine. He rubbed a pinch between his fingers. Old, decades old. This stove hadn't been used in a long time, but it had been used often once. Rex paused near the broken window and sniffed at the sill. He sneezed once, a sharp sound in the quiet room, then returned to his work. Sam allowed himself a brief, almost smile. The dog had always hated dust. "Easy," Sam murmured, though Rex hadn't shown any sign of agitation. Sam moved toward a narrow hallway leading deeper into the house. The boards here were darker, stained by years of moisture creeping in from the ground. He placed his weight carefully, remembering too many floors that had collapsed without warning in places that were supposed to be safe. At the end of the hallway were two doors. One stood open, revealing a small bedroom stripped bare, except for a rusted metal bed frame. The mattress was gone. So were any personal effects. The walls were marked with faint lines, as if something heavy had once been dragged across them repeatedly. The second door was closed. Rex stopped in front of it, posture changing just enough for Sam to notice. His head lifted, his ears angled forward. He sniffed once, then again, slower this time. His tail stilled. Sam's chest tightened. He knew that posture too. "What have you got?" he asked softly. Rex did not answer, but he stepped aside, giving Sam access to the door. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Rex wasn't blocking. He was deferring. Sam reached for the handle. It was metal, cold and rough with rust. When he turned it, the latch resisted, then gave with a dull click that echoed louder than it should have. He opened the door. The room beyond was smaller than the first bedroom and darker. The window here was intact but clouded with grime, letting in only a murky gray light. The air felt different, thicker somehow, as if it had not been disturbed in a very long time. Against the far wall stood a tall wooden cabinet, its surface warped but intact. Beside it sat a footlocker, olive drab, edges reinforced with steel. Sam froze. The footlocker was military issue. He would have known it anywhere. The color, the dimensions, the way the metal had dulled over time, it was unmistakable. His pulse quickened, not with fear, but with recognition sharp enough to ache. Rex entered the room quietly and sat beside the footlocker, looking up at Sam, not guarding it, indicating it. Sam crouched, knees protesting, and ran a hand over the top of the locker. Dust coated his glove. He brushed it away to reveal a faint stencil, numbers and letters partially worn off. Unit designation, maybe, or supply code. His breath caught before he could stop it. "Damn!" he whispered. He opened the locker slowly. The hinges complained, but held. Inside, the contents were arranged with care. Folded fabric, a canvas pouch, a small tin, no weapons, no explosives, just belongings. Sam lifted the folded fabric first. It was a flag. Not pristine, but not ruined either. Carefully folded, edges worn soft with handling. Beneath it lay a stack of notebooks bound with string, their covers darkened with age. He did not open them yet. He didn't need to. He already knew what they were. Men who kept notebooks in places like this did so because they needed to remember, or because they were afraid they would be forgotten. Rex shifted slightly, leaning his weight against Sam's leg. The contact was solid, grounding. Sam realized his hands were shaking. He sat back on his heels and took a slow breath, in through his nose, out through his mouth. The training was old, but it still worked if he let it. He looked around the room again, seeing it now with clearer eyes. The cabinet against the wall bore faint scratches near its base, as if it had been moved often. The bed frame was missing entirely, not dismantled, but removed. This hadn't been a place for living, it had been a place for waiting. A sound reached them then. A low, distant creak, followed by the soft scuttle of movement. Sam stiffened instantly, every nerve firing. Rex rose in one smooth motion, body angling toward the sound. His growl was low and brief, cut off almost as soon as it began. From the far corner of the room, a shape emerged from behind the cabinet. A raccoon, thin and wet, eyes bright with surprise. It froze, just as Rex had earlier, caught between instinct and calculation. The animal was young, ribs faintly visible beneath its soaked fur. One ear nicked at the edge. Sam relaxed a fraction, tension easing from his shoulders. "Easy," he said again, this time louder. The raccoon bolted past them, claws scrabbling against the floor, and disappeared out the open door and into the rain. Rex watched it go, but did not give chase. He glanced back at Sam, as if checking whether restraint had been the correct call. Sam exhaled a quiet laugh, surprised by the sound of it. Good call, he said. He closed the footlocker gently and stood, joints creaking louder than the house ever had. The humor faded quickly, replaced by the steady weight of realization. This place had history, specific history, not folklore, not rumor. It had been used intentionally by people who knew what they were doing and had reason to stay hidden. Sam looked down at Rex, who had resumed his steady watch, tail relaxed but eyes alert. "We weren't supposed to find this," Sam said, not accusing, just stating fact. Rex did not disagree. Sam stepped back into the main room and scanned it again, this time seeing signs he had missed before. The way the table was positioned to keep the window in sight, the hooks arranged by reach, the stove placed where smoke could be controlled. This house hadn't been abandoned carelessly. It had been left behind deliberately. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm. Sam knew then that they weren't leaving just yet. Not because he wanted answers, though he did, but because this place deserved a closer look, because the men who had waited here, whoever they were, had trusted that someone might one day understand what they had left behind. He rested a hand briefly on the footlocker, then turned toward the door leading further into the house. Rex fell in beside him without command. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it the way they always had, together, carefully, and without looking away. The rain settled into a steady rhythm against the roof, no longer sharp but insistent, as if it had decided to stay a while. Inside the house, the sound wrapped around Sam and Rex, dulling the edges of the silence without filling it. Sam stood in the doorway of the small back room, looking again at the footlocker he had closed moments earlier. Closing it had not sealed anything. If anything, it had made the weight of what lay inside more present. He knelt once more, joints protesting, and this time he opened the notebooks. The paper was thick and yellowed, the kind made to endure damp and time. The handwriting inside was disciplined but human, lines neat until they weren't, letters pressed hard where emotion had overridden control. Sam read slowly, careful not to rush past meaning. These were not official logs. There were no serial numbers or formal headings, just dates, places written in shorthand, and names. Names always mattered. Rex lay down beside him, head on his paws, eyes open. The dog did not crowd, did not intrude. He had learned long ago when stillness was the best form of support. The first notebook belonged to a man named Thomas Avery, a lieutenant by rank, judging from the scattered notes and references. Sam pictured him without trying. Early 30s, lean, likely sharp-featured, the kind of officer who relied on competence rather than volume. The writing spoke of someone methodical, someone who believed that clarity was a kind of mercy. Avery wrote about the house as Site C, describing it as a fallback position, a place meant to disappear once it had served its purpose. The second notebook was different, messier, emotional. It belonged to Elias Monroe, younger, probably enlisted. Sam imagined a broad-shouldered man with restless hands, the kind who smiled easily until the war taught him not to. The entries jumped between fear and humor, sarcasm used like a shield. One passage made Sam stop reading for a long moment. "If anyone finds this, tell my sister Ruth I didn't run." We waited. We always waited. Sam swallowed hard. He had seen that sentence in too many forms, written and unwritten. He flipped through more pages, finding other names, other voices layered on top of one another. None of them spoke of glory. They spoke of weather, of hunger, of boredom so deep it became dangerous. They spoke of orders that never came and silence that stretched too long. Sam realized then that this house hadn't just been a shelter. It had been a holding place for men suspended between missions, between identities, between survival and erasure. Rex lifted his head suddenly, ears tilting. Sam felt it too, a shift in the air, subtle but undeniable. A sound carried through the rain, not from the house but from beyond it. A low rumble, uneven, followed by a human voice. Sam closed the notebook carefully and stood, heart rate rising not from panic but from calculation. He moved to the broken window and peered out through the grime. A pickup truck sat at the edge of the clearing, its tires sinking into the soft earth. It was old but well-maintained, dark green with a dented rear panel. A man stood beside it, hood pulled low against the rain, as he struggled with something in the bed of the truck. Sam watched for a full 30 seconds before moving. The man was in his early 40s, tall and solidly built, with a beard thick enough to hide most of his jawline. His movements were careful but not hesitant, suggesting someone accustomed to physical work. When he finally turned, Sam caught a glimpse of his face, weathered, sharp-eyed, the expression of someone who spent more time outdoors than in conversation. This was not a hiker who had stumbled onto the house by accident. Rex gave a low, questioning sound. "Stay," Sam whispered, not a command, a request. Sam stepped out onto the porch, boots creaking. The man looked up immediately, hand pausing mid-motion. His posture changed, not aggressive but alert. "Didn't expect company," the man called, voice carrying easily through the rain. "Neither did I," Sam replied. The man wiped his hands on his jeans and took a step forward. "Name's Daniel Crow," he said. "I check old structures for the county, storm damage, safety hazards." Sam studied him closely. Daniel Crow had the look of someone who'd learned to keep his emotions behind his eyes. There were faint scars on his knuckles, the kind earned through work rather than fights. His beard was streaked with early gray. He stood with his weight balanced, as if always ready to move. "Sam Whitaker," Sam said. "This place wasn't on my map." Daniel snorted lightly. "That's because it stopped being on anyone's map about 70 years ago." Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "You knew it was here." "I knew something was," Daniel said. "Didn't know what shape it'd be in." His gaze flicked past Sam toward the open door. "You find anything inside?" Sam hesitated. Years of instinct screamed caution, but something in Daniel's tone, not curiosity, not greed, suggested restraint. A man who knew when to ask and when to wait. "I found names," Sam said finally. Daniel's expression shifted, subtle but real. His jaw tightened. "Then you found what everyone else missed." They stood there in the rain, two men shaped by different kinds of service measuring each other. Rex stepped into view behind Sam, presence unmistakable. Daniel noticed him immediately. "K9?" he asked. "Retired," Sam said. Daniel nodded once, respect evident. "Figures." Daniel explained then, briefly, that his grandfather had spoken of a unit stationed in these mountains during the war, men who vanished from records but not from memory. The stories had always sounded like family myth. Until now. "I think this place was meant to disappear," Daniel said, "but not forever." Sam looked back into the house, at the doorframe worn smooth by hands long gone. "They waited," he said. "Long enough." The rain eased slightly, as if listening. Sam knew he would not walk away from this. Not now. The house had been patient, the names had endured, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt that the past wasn't reaching for him to pull him under. It was asking him to stand witness. Rex sat at his side, steady and sure. That Sam could do. The rain eased into a mist by late afternoon, thinning just enough to let the forest breathe again. Daniel Crow's truck remained at the edge of the clearing, its engine long cooled, a quiet acknowledgement that he wasn't leaving anytime soon. Sam stood inside the main room with Rex at his side, watching Daniel move carefully through the space, his eyes adjusting not just to the light but to the weight of what the house carried. Daniel did not touch anything at first. He walked slowly, boots placed with deliberate care, as if the floor itself deserved respect. Up close, Sam noticed more details about him, the lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting against weather, the way his beard had been trimmed with utility rather than style in mind, the faint stiffness in his left shoulder when he reached overhead. There was an old injury there, Sam guessed, something that never healed quite right and taught the body to compensate without complaint. "You weren't exaggerating," Daniel said quietly, stopping near the long table. "This wasn't just some backwoods hideout." "No," Sam replied. It was a pause, maybe the last one they had. Daniel nodded once, then turned toward the footlocker. He did not open it. "My grandfather used to say some men never got to come home because home didn't know they existed anymore." Sam looked at him sharply. "He was in the service?" "Logistics," Daniel said. "Paperwork, mostly. He spent the rest of his life trying to make sure names didn't vanish just because they were inconvenient." He let out a breath. "Didn't always succeed." Rex rose and walked toward the cabinet against the wall, sniffing at its base again. This time, his interest lingered. He pawed lightly at the floor, not scratching, just indicating. Sam followed, crouching to examine the boards. One plank sat slightly higher than the others, its edge worn smooth by repeated handling. "Hold on," Sam said. He slid the plank aside, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside lay a leather-bound folder, sealed with a strap stiffened by age. Daniel leaned closer, rain-damp jacket creasing at the shoulders. Sam opened the folder carefully. Inside were folded documents, orders, maps, and a typed roster. The ink had faded but remained legible. Sam scanned the names, heart tightening. Some he recognized from the notebooks, others were new. "These weren't unofficial," Sam said. "They were never meant to be found." Daniel swallowed. "Which means someone decided they should be." A sound drifted in from outside then, the crunch of tires on wet earth. Both men stiffened, instincts aligning instantly. Rex's head snapped up, ears forward, body angled toward the door. Sam moved to the window and peered out. A second vehicle had entered the clearing, this one a county sedan, white with a faded seal on the door. It parked beside Daniel's truck. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. She was in her early 50s, average height, with dark hair streaked liberally with silver, cut short and practical. Her posture was upright but not rigid, as if she had learned authority without needing to display it constantly. She carried a canvas satchel slung over one shoulder, worn soft with use. "That'll be Margaret Hill," Daniel said under his breath. "County Historical Liaison." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You called her?" Daniel nodded. "After I saw the truck tracks, figured this was bigger than a structural report." Margaret approached the porch, eyes already scanning the building with practiced interest. When she stepped inside, her gaze moved quickly, cataloging details Sam had only begun to understand. "So," she said, voice calm, carrying the faintest Appalachian lilt, "this is where they went." She introduced herself properly then, extending a hand to Sam. Her grip was firm, steady. There was a thin scar along her wrist, pale against her skin. "Archivist by training," she said, "historian by necessity. My job is to listen when the past finally decides to speak." Sam liked her immediately. Not because she was warm, she wasn't particularly, but because she didn't treat the house like a curiosity. Margaret examined the documents with reverence, flipping pages with gloved fingers. "These names," she said softly. "They were flagged years ago. Men who disappeared between deployments. No records of death, no records of discharge." "They waited," Sam said. "Yes," Margaret replied, "and someone promised they wouldn't be forgotten." As the afternoon wore on, the three of them worked in quiet coordination. Margaret photographed documents and sketched the layout of the house. Daniel measured beams and supports, noting how carefully the structure had been maintained long past its intended use. Sam kept watch, his presence grounding, Rex moving calmly among them, occasionally stopping to sniff or sit beside someone who seemed to need it. At one point, Margaret knelt beside Rex, studying him with professional curiosity. "He's older," she observed. 10, Sam said. "He still works," she said, not asking. Rex met her gaze, steady and unblinking. As dusk settled, Margaret closed her satchel. "This will draw attention," she said, "the right kind eventually. But there will be questions, processes, delays." Sam nodded. He had lived with worse. "What happens to the house?" "That," Margaret said, "depends on what you want it to become." The question lingered. Outside, the mist thickened again, wrapping the clearing in soft gray. Daniel packed his tools slowly, glancing back at the house more than once. "I'll file a preliminary report," he said. "Careful wording. No sensationalism." Margaret smiled faintly. "That alone makes it revolutionary." They left as night approached, engines fading into the forest's hush. Sam stood on the porch with Rex beside him, watching until the last sound was gone. Inside, the house felt different now, not lighter, but acknowledged. Sam sat at the table, resting his hands on the scarred wood. He thought of the names, the waiting, the careful preservation. The house hadn't asked to be saved or exposed. It had asked to be understood. Rex lay at his feet, breathing slow and even. "All right," Sam said quietly. "We'll do it right." The house did not answer. It didn't need to. The house did not sleep that night. and neither did Sam. The rain returned after midnight, heavier than before, drumming against the roof with a persistence that felt deliberate. Sam sat at the table where the men had once eaten in silence, the lantern casting a soft amber circle that barely pushed back the dark. Rex lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but attentive. Every so often his ears twitched at a sound outside, a branch settling, water slipping off leaves. But he did not rise. He trusted the night enough to rest. Sam did not. By morning the clearing bore fresh tracks, not from animals, boots, careful ones. Sam noticed them immediately, the way he always noticed what didn't belong. He stepped onto the porch and scanned the tree line, posture easy but alert. Rex stood at his side, tail relaxed, eyes working the edges. A woman emerged first, followed by an older man. They approached slowly, hands visible, as if they understood the language of caution without being taught. Daniel Crow followed a few steps behind them, shoulders hunched slightly against the cold. He raised a hand in greeting. "Morning," Daniel called. "Didn't want to surprise you." The woman introduced herself as Evelyn Monroe, mid-60s, tall and spare, with silver hair pulled back in a low knot that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Her coat was wool, dark and well-worn, and she moved with the careful dignity of someone who had learned patience the hard way. The man beside her was Henry Monroe, a few years older, broader through the shoulders despite the stoop age had given him. His beard was white and neatly trimmed. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from the cold. "My uncle," Evelyn said, her voice steady but thin at the edges. "Elias Monroe." Sam felt the name settle into place like a puzzle piece finally turned the right way. He nodded once. "I read his words." Henry swallowed. "He wrote?" "He did," Sam said. "A lot." They stood there for a moment, the forest holding its breath. Rex stepped forward and sat at Evelyn's feet, unprompted. She glanced down, surprised, then reached out slowly, fingers brushing the fur along his neck. Her hand trembled, then stilled. "He always liked dogs," she said softly. "Said they understood waiting." Sam led them inside. He did not rush the moment. He showed them the room, the table, the hooks on the wall. He let Evelyn read from the notebook herself, turning pages with reverent care. Henry stood behind her, one hand braced on the chair back, eyes fixed on the words as if they might vanish if he blinked. Daniel and Margaret Hill arrived mid-morning, followed by two others Margaret had called in. Thomas Keller, a museum conservator in his late 30s with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers, and Nora Pike, a county social worker with a calm, open face and a habit of listening more than speaking. Thomas moved with precise gentleness, documenting without disturbing. Nora watched the people, not the artifacts, noting who needed space and who needed a chair. As word spread, carefully, quietly, more visitors came. Not crowds, individuals. A man in his 70s with a cane who stood longer than his joints liked. A woman with a faded photograph tucked into her coat pocket, eyes bright with a hope she didn't quite trust. They arrived with restraint, as if sensing that noise would break something fragile. Sam found himself speaking more than he had in years, not because he wanted to, but because the house required it. He explained what they knew and what they didn't. He refused to speculate. He corrected gently when people tried to turn waiting into heroics. They were patient, he said. That's not the same thing. Rex became a quiet constant, moving among the visitors with an ease that surprised even Sam. He paused beside Henry when the man's breath hitched, leaned against a woman who needed grounding, lay at Sam's feet during the harder conversations. He wore his age openly now, stiffness in the hind legs, gray at the muzzle, but there was authority in his presence, the kind that came from having done the work and survived it. Late in the afternoon, a county vehicle pulled into the clearing. From it stepped Captain Laura Bennett, early 40s, uniform pressed, hair pulled into a tight bun that did nothing to soften her angular features. Her jaw was square, her gaze direct. She had the bearing of someone who had learned to carry responsibility without asking for permission. A scar traced a pale line from her right eyebrow into her hairline, an old injury that had taught her caution and resolve in equal measure. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was measured. "We'll secure the site," she said, "not shut it down, protect it." Sam studied her, weighing tone and intent. He nodded. That's all anyone's asking. As evening approached, the visitors thinned. The Monroes lingered last. Evelyn closed the notebook gently and pressed her palm to the cover. He waited, she said again. This time it wasn't a question. Yes, Sam said, and now he's been heard. Henry cleared his throat. What happens next? Sam looked around the room, the table, the hooks, the door that never quite latched. He thought of the question Margaret had asked the day before. Next, he said, we do this slowly, and we don't make it about anything it wasn't. They left at dusk, headlights threading through the trees. The house settled back into quiet, but it was a different quiet now. Acknowledged. Witnessed. Sam stepped outside with Rex. The sky had cleared enough to show a strip of pale blue above the ridge. The air smelled clean, lighter. You did good today, Sam said, resting a hand on Rex's shoulder. The dog leaned into the touch, just enough to say he agreed. Inside, the lantern still burned. Sam extinguished it carefully, leaving the room to the dark. He didn't lock the door. He didn't need to. The house was no longer asking to be hidden. It had asked to be seen. And now, finally, it was. The mountains changed character once the attention faded. After the officials left and the families returned to their separate lives, the forest reclaimed its quieter voice. The clearing emptied. Tire tracks softened under rain. What remained was the house, Sam and Rex, and the work that could not be rushed without becoming something else entirely. Sam returned each morning at first light. He brought coffee in a thermos and a notebook of his own, the pages blank and patient. Rex trotted ahead as always, slower now, hips stiff on cold mornings, but his posture still purposeful. The dog's coat had dulled with age to a charcoal sheen, and his eyes carried the steady amber of long service. Sam had learned to read the day in Rex's movements, when the dog paused longer at the tree line, when he chose shade instead of sun, when he rested without being asked. They adjusted together, without discussion. Margaret Hill coordinated quietly from town. She did not bring reporters. She brought permits, archival boxes, and careful timelines. When she did come to the house, she wore gloves and a wool scarf and the expression of someone who believed that accuracy was a form of kindness. This isn't about revealing everything at once, she told Sam. It's about revealing it correctly. Daniel Crow returned intermittently with lumber and tarps, reinforcing weak beams and shoring up the roof where the metal had loosened. He worked with a carpenter's economy, no wasted movement, no unnecessary talk. His left shoulder still troubled him. Sam noticed how Daniel shifted weight to compensate, the same way soldiers did when injuries became permanent companions. When Sam offered help, Daniel accepted without ceremony. On the third week, a new visitor arrived unannounced, not by vehicle, but on foot. He came along the old trail from the east, a tall man with a ranger's gait and a pack slung high on his back. His beard was dark and full, flecked with rain, and his hair, tied back loosely, had gone silver at the temples despite his youth. He introduced himself as Owen Markham, late 30s, regional land steward for the state forest. His voice was soft, but his eyes missed nothing. I heard about the site, Owen said, standing at the threshold without crossing it. I wanted to see how the land was responding. Sam blinked. Responding? Owen smiled faintly. Land remembers use. Sometimes it resists change. Sometimes it welcomes it. He walked the perimeter slowly, kneeling to touch soil, examining how water flowed away from the foundation. He noted where erosion threatened the slope and where roots stabilized it. If this place is to remain, he said, it should do so without harming the forest that hid it. Sam liked that answer. Inside, the work shifted from discovery to care. Thomas Keller supervised the removal of documents to a temporary conservation lab in town, but he insisted on leaving copies, facsimiles accurate enough to be read without fear. The house needs its voice, he said, adjusting his glasses with ink-smudged fingers, even if the originals rest elsewhere. Families returned on scheduled days, not as visitors now, but as participants. Evelyn Monroe came often. She wore the same wool coat each time, its elbows patched neatly, and carried herself with the composed resolve of someone who had decided to be useful. She helped transcribe entries, reading Elias's words aloud so they could be captured faithfully. Her voice did not shake anymore. When it faltered, she paused, breathed, and continued. Henry Monroe came less frequently. The walk tired him. When he did come, he sat at the table and listened. He touched the wood as if it might recognize him. Rex often lay at his feet, warming Henry's ankles, a quiet truce between two bodies that had earned their aches. As weeks turned, the house became a place of return rather than revelation. People came not to learn something new, but to sit with what was known. Sam found himself acting as caretaker without ever naming it. He swept the floors. He kept the stove clean, though it was no longer used. He repaired the door hinge so it would close fully, not to lock out the world, but to keep the wind honest. One afternoon, Sam noticed Rex lagging behind on the path. The dog stopped and stood, chest rising and falling more heavily than usual. His ears flicked, then lowered. Sam crouched immediately, hands steady. "That's enough for today," he said. Rex met his gaze, then looked toward the house. He wanted to continue. Sam saw it in the set of his jaw, the familiar refusal to be the first to stop. Sam rested his forehead briefly against Rex's. "You've done your share." They turned back together. That evening, Sam sat on the porch steps with Rex beside him, watching dusk thicken the trees. A horse moved quietly through the lower meadow, an old chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face, ribs faint beneath her coat. She belonged to a neighboring farm and had begun to wander closer lately, curious but cautious. Sam had learned her habits. She was in her late teens, gentle-eyed, slow to trust. Tonight, she paused at the fence, head lowered, breath steaming softly. Rex lifted his head but did not rise. The mare flicked an ear, then relaxed. The forest held them all without comment. Margaret arrived just before dark with news. "The county approved the proposal," she said, setting her satchel down. "A small memorial, educational use, limited access, and, if you're willing, a resident steward." Sam didn't answer right away. He watched Rex shift his weight, settle more comfortably. He thought of his cabin at the edge of town, the quiet mornings, the solitary routines. He thought of the table inside, the names, the waiting that had ended not with answers, but with acknowledgement. "What would that look like?" he asked. "Living here part-time," Margaret said, "guiding when needed, watching when not, being present without being intrusive." Sam nodded slowly. "I can do that." Margaret smiled, not broadly, not triumphantly, but with relief. The next day, Sam packed his notebook and brought a second thermos. He adjusted the porch rail Daniel had reinforced. He laid out chairs in the main room, spaced generously. Rex slept more that afternoon, breath deep and even. When he woke, Sam was there. By the end of the month, the house had a rhythm again, not the tense waiting of before, but something steadier. The forest accepted it. Owen marked trails that curved away gently, discouraging accidental intrusion. The mare continued to visit, sometimes closer, sometimes not. Rex learned where the sun fell warmest on the floor and chose those places to rest. On a clear morning, Sam stood at the doorway and felt something he had not expected. Not closure, but continuity. The past had not ended. It had joined the present, quietly, without ceremony. Rex came to stand beside him, leaning just enough to be felt. "Home's a strange word," Sam said aloud, "but it fits." The house did not answer. It never did. It didn't need to. The dedication took place on a showery morning in early spring, the kind of rain that fell softly enough to feel intentional. Mist threaded through the trees, blurring the ridgelines into a single breathing shape. The house stood steadier now, its roof repaired, its boards treated, its windows clear. It did not look new. It looked cared for. Sam preferred it that way. Newness implied erasure. Care implied memory. Sam arrived before anyone else, as he always did. He walked the perimeter once, boots quiet on damp earth, checking the drainage channels Owen Markham had helped cut along the slope. The land had settled around the changes, accepting them without complaint. Rex followed at a slower pace, hips stiff but reliable, his coat brushed smooth and his collar polished to a muted shine. He was 11 now. His muzzle had gone almost entirely gray, and his eyes, still keen, carried a softness Sam had come to recognize as contentment. Inside, the main room had been arranged simply. The long table remained, but it now held laminated copies of the notebooks and maps, placed so hands could rest on them without fear. Along one wall, Margaret Hill had curated a modest display, names etched into wood panels, not in ranks or units, but alphabetically, without hierarchy. Waiting doesn't need ordering, she had said, and Sam had agreed. Families arrived quietly, greeted by Nora Pike, whose presence had become a gentle constant. She wore a soft blue jacket and carried herself with the calm competence of someone who knew how to hold space. She guided people to chairs, offered water, and remembered names. When she spoke, it was brief and precise. When she listened, it was complete. Daniel Crow stood near the doorway, arms folded, beard trimmed shorter than usual. He wore a clean workshirt and boots still marked by use. The old injury in his shoulder hadn't improved, but he had learned to work around it with patience rather than frustration. He watched the beams overhead with a carpenter's eye, satisfied. Margaret arrived with Thomas Keller and a small contingent from the county. No banners, no cameras. Captain Laura Bennett stood off to one side, uniform subdued, posture respectful. She had insisted on that tone, on keeping the focus where it belonged. Evelyn Monroe entered with Henry, who leaned on his cane but refused help beyond that. Evelyn's hair was pinned neatly, her wool coat brushed clean. She carried herself with a purpose that had settled into her bones. When she reached the names on the wall, she touched Elias's gently, then stepped back and nodded once, as if completing a promise. The ceremony was brief. Margaret spoke first, her voice steady, explaining what the house had been and what it would be now, a memorial, a place of learning, and a quiet refuge for veterans and families seeking understanding rather than spectacle. Captain Bennett acknowledged the service of those who waited here, choosing words that honored without inflating. Evelyn read a single paragraph from Elias's notebook, one about weather, about how the rain made the waiting easier because it gave the silence something to do. Then, Sam was asked to speak. He stood at the table, hands resting on the scarred wood, and felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He hadn't prepared remarks. He never did. He looked at the faces before him, lined, hopeful, tired, grateful, and then down at Rex, who sat at his side, steady and present. This house didn't want a story, Sam said. It wanted witnesses. The men who waited here weren't trying to be remembered for bravery or sacrifice. They were doing a job, and then they kept doing it when the job became waiting. What we're doing today isn't finishing their story. It's standing with it. He stopped there. Anything more would have been too much. Afterward, people moved through the rooms at their own pace. Some lingered, some left quickly. A few sat in silence, eyes closed, letting the space do its work. Rex made his rounds, slower now, choosing where to stop. He leaned against Henry's shin, accepted a careful scratch from Nora, ignored a child's tentative reach with polite disinterest. He was tired, but it was a good tired. Outside, the old chestnut mare wandered near the fence again, rain darkening her coat. A new addition stood nearby, a modest hitching post Owen had installed to keep her visits from damaging the grass. She paused, breathed, and flicked an ear toward the house. Rex watched her with mild curiosity, tail giving a single, slow wag. They had come to an understanding. As the crowd thinned, Sam closed the door and latched it properly for the first time, not to keep people out, but to mark the end of the day. He walked Rex back along the trail, choosing the gentler path Owen had recommended. The forest was brighter now, rain easing, birds testing their voices. Rex set the pace, slow and sure. At the cabin in Laurel Gap, Sam made tea instead of coffee. He sat on the porch with Rex beside him, the dog's head resting against his leg. Sam brushed Rex's coat with long, careful strokes, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. The dog's eyes closed. He slept, deep and untroubled. That night, Sam slept too. No orders, no waiting, just rest. Weeks passed. The house opened on a schedule, guided by volunteers and families who had chosen to return. Sam spent mornings there and afternoons at home, learning the balance between presence and privacy. Rex came along when he could and stayed back when he needed to. There was no argument about it anymore. They had learned the language of enough. On a clear day in early summer, Sam stood at the doorway of the house and watched light spill across the floor. The names on the wall caught it gently, letters glowing without glare. He felt something settle inside him. Not closure, but peace, earned and shared. Rex came to stand beside him, leaning just enough to be felt. "We did it right," Sam said. Rex's tail moved once, slow and certain. The house held the moment without comment. The forest breathed. The waiting had turned into light. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or fire. Sometimes they come quietly, through a loyal dog that refuses to give up, a weathered house that remembers names, or a heart that finally chooses to listen. Maybe that is how God often works in our lives, not by erasing the past, but by redeeming it, turning long years of waiting into meaning. What was forgotten is seen again. What was broken is given purpose, and those who thought their journey was over discover they are still needed. As you return to your own daily life, your routines, your worries, your silent battles, remember this: no step taken with compassion is ever wasted. No act of kindness goes unseen by God. If this story stirred something in your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who may feel lost or alone. Leave a comment and tell us what part touched you most and where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories of hope, faith, and quiet strength. And may God bless you, protect you, and bring peace to your home today and always.